Hello, everyone. We're going to give it 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to just join us, and then we'll begin. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Soumya Joseph. I am the project leader for MyVow, which is Migrant Women Opportunities for Work, a project of New Communities Partnership, co-funded by the Government of Ireland and the European Social Fund under the Programme for Employability, Inclusion and Learning. Before I start the webinar, I just wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded so that we can make it available to people who are unable to join us today. And I would also like to now tell you a little bit about MyVow before we go. MyVow's aim is to explore, support, and overcome the specific barriers that migrant women are facing in Ireland during their job-seeking journey. MyVow is designed to empower migrant women to reach their potential, rebuild their confidence, and upgrade their skills through a free 4-week employment training. Additionally, we offer equality, diversity, and inclusion training to HR staffs, recruiters, and people involved in the hiring processes of companies or organizations so that we can work together to overcome the barriers that migrant women are facing in accessing employment in Ireland. And we also offer information sessions like today's, where we cover topics of importance for migrants in their lives in Ireland. If you would like to know any more information about our programs, please contact myvow@newcommunities.ie, and I will leave that in the chat box. Now getting into today's business. The aim of today's session is for you to learn and be informed about different aspects of visas and stamps in Ireland. We realize that despite the many efforts from different organizations, such as the ones that some of our guest speakers are from, there is still a lot of information that is required to be disseminated. And without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome and be joined by our 3 speakers, Lisa, Brian, and Edith. I'm also very delighted to welcome our ISL interpreters, Ali and Pauline. And I would also like to welcome Laura, my colleague from NC, is going to be helping us and supporting this webinar. Welcome, everyone. Now I'm going to pass it on Lisa. She is an information and advocacy officer with Cross-Care Migrant Project since February 2019. She specializes in the immigration system, provides training programs, and produces content for Cross-Care Migrant Project's website. We're very, very happy to have you, Lisa, and the floor is yours now.
Thanks very much, Soumya, and thanks as well to the New Communities Partnership for inviting me to this webinar. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Good morning, everyone. And so as Soumya just mentioned, I am from the Cross-Care Migrant Project, and I'm just going to start sharing my screen so that you can see my PowerPoint presentation. And yeah, so Cross-Care Migrant Project is a project of Cross-Care, which is a social support agency of Dublin Archdiocese. We also work closely with our colleagues on the Housing and Welfare and Information Project and the Refugee Service. So the Cross-Care Migrant Project provide a different range of services, including support for migrant living in Ireland. We also have a team working with immigrant living abroad and returning Irish. We provide an information and advocacy service and referrals to different organizations when it's needed. We also provide training and information. We update our website and we do some publication on a regular basis. And we also have a networking collaboration and policy and research team for different purposes. So in today's session, of the reason why people migrate to Ireland, I will give a quick introduction to immigration terminology and the difference between a visa and an immigration permission. Then we'll go into the overview of immigration permission, including the STEM 4. I will talk very quickly about family reunification and citizenship, and then the floor will be for the Q&A. So first of all, it's important to know that there is different reasons why people are migrating to Ireland. My colleague Brian will cover the study and work reasons for coming to Ireland, while Edith will be covering the seeking asylum. So as you may understand today, I will be covering the joining family and the reason why people are coming to join the family to Ireland. So first of all, I think it's very important to understand the difference between a visa and a residence permission, as people may confuse the two different terminology. So a visa is a permission that allows to enter a country. Not everyone is visa required. For example, Indian national will be visa required and they need to apply for a visa before being able to travel to Ireland. While other countries, like for example, Brazilian national, they do not need to visa to come to Ireland. A visa process is basically a pre-clearance check. So basically you need to apply for a visa if your visa required, but this doesn't mean that you will be guaranteed entry in Ireland. So you could be granted a visa, go at the border, but it's still a discretionary decision of the immigration officer at the airport to let you in the country or not. And so, yeah. And so this is definition for a visa, and this is what it would look like in a passport. If you are from a visa required country and need to get a visa, this is how it would look like in your passport if you were to get the stamp. Well, in immigration or residence permission, also called a stamp, this is the type of permission that is granted when you arrive in Ireland, so after you come into the country. There is always a basis for the permission, so it could be that it's being given to spouse of an Irish citizen, for example. And there's always an entitlement and a restriction to a permission. Can I have the right to work or not? And we'll get into more details later on during the presentation. So some immigration permission are issued by letters, by immigration service delivery, and some other are being directly given by the immigration officer when registering for the permission. So on your left, you can see that that's what a stamp looks like in a passport once it's been registered with the immigration officer at the local registration office. And on your right, you have an example of the type of permission letter that may be granted to people who need to get a letter to be able to stay in Ireland on a legal basis. So as I was explaining, the immigration permission when you arrive in Ireland needs to be registered with a local registration office. And as you may know already, you would be getting what we call a GNIB card, or now IRP card. So on the left, you have the new look of the IRP card, who has been updated in March 2022. And on the right, you would have the old IRP card. So this is the card that basically gives the condition of your permission in Ireland, also has an expiry date and may need to be renewed in a year or 3 years, depending on the length of your permission. And it also says your nationality, date of birth, and other specifications. So just to go a bit more into more detail about the stamps now. So as I explained, the immigration permission differs from people, and as the other panelists will be covering some stamps, I will be going into more detail about the stamp 3, stamp 4, stamp 5 and 6. So the stamp 3 is one of the most common stamps given to people coming to Ireland. And this is mostly for people who are depending on somebody. So it's they're joining somebody to come to Ireland, and they're depending on either a parent, a spouse, and other family members. So the stamp 3, in most cases, would be given to spouse of what we call non-EEA family members. So for example, somebody who is from India and already in Ireland working and wants to bring a family member, they would be given a stamp 3 as their dependent. So as you can see on that PowerPoint, there is different cases in which the stamp 3 is given, but it's mostly for dependent family member. The stamp 4 is the most common per stamp, and also a better shape, to be honest, because the stamp 3 does not allow to work and does not allow access to social welfare payment, while the stamp 4 is the stamps that allows to work and in some cases allow access to social welfare payment. So stamp 4 is given to, as you can see, a numerous number of people, including spouse, parents, dependents of Irish national, people who have refugee status, and that might be covered by my colleague later on, Edith. There is also some people who, for example, were on the work permit for 2 years or 5 years. It was a general work employment permit, then they will be granted a stamp 4 at a later stage. There is also different type of stamp 4. So stamp 4, the general stamp 4 is as I described for dependent family members of Irish citizens and all. But the stamp 4 EU family, for example, is a very specific stamp given to non-EEA family members of EU citizens. So for example, let's say a French citizen is living in Ireland and their spouse is from a non-European countries, but they want to let them come to Ireland to live with them. Well, this person, the family member, will be granted a stamp 4 EU family as a dependent of their EU spouse. So this is a very specific stamp for EU, a non-EEA family member of EU workers in Ireland. And this stamp 4 EU family allows to work and access, in some cases, social welfare payments. The stamp 4S is a very specific stamp that you might have seen back in 2018 and 2019. It was issued through a special student scheme for people who were undocumented for quite a while, and this was granted for a maximum of 2 years. So all the national who got a stamp 4 in 2018 should have now switched to a stamp 4, a general access. And then finally, the stamp 4D, this is also newly introduced since Brexit. So previously, the spouse or dependent of UK citizens would be granted a general stamp for EU family. But now, because of Brexit, those national wouldn't be granted a stamp 4D, or also called the Article 50 TEU. And that's to cover the stamp 4. I also wanted to briefly talk about the stamp 0, which is less common, but also still exists and possible and accessible to some people. And so the stamp 0 is usually granted to self-sufficient people. That means people that can live in Ireland based on independent means. So we see mostly for people who want to retire to Ireland, and so they would be granted a stamp 0 in that type of cases. This does not allow to work, does not allow to access social welfare payments, and this is why those people coming under a stamp 0 needs to be self-sufficient. This stamp 0 can also be given to elderly dependent family members. So in this case, the stamp 0 holder wouldn't be self-sufficient in a way, but they would be covered by their family member who would be paying for everything for them in Ireland. The stamp 5 now is also a very interesting stamp that not everybody is aware of, but it's basically for anybody who has been living legally in Ireland for over 8 years. So it would be stamp 3 holders, stamp 1 holders, and stamp 4 holders if they've been living in Ireland for a minimum of 8 years. Then they can apply for stamp 5 that will give them a longer residence permission, basically. So it's quite a good stamp if it can be acquired. And finally, the stamp 6 is issued for people who have dual citizenship. So for example, if we have somebody from Nigeria who just became Irish, they can get a stamp 6 in their Nigerian passport, which basically will show the immigration officer that they're also Irish and they would be able to travel on their Nigerian passport back and forth in Ireland. And this stamp is also called as conditional endorsement. So now that we know a bit more about the stamps, I thought it would be as well interesting for you to know a bit more about family reunification and how to join a family member in Ireland. So there is a requirement and criteria of eligibility to bring family member in Ireland, depending on the stamp that the person is holding or depending on the nationality. So first of all, I'd like to make a distinction. When I say applicant, I mean a person who is applying for a visa to come to Ireland, and a sponsor is a person who is already in Ireland and who wants to bring a family member to come. The question that the sponsor needs to ask themselves before they can apply for family reunification is, am I eligible to sponsor a family member? Who can I bring? Which family member can I bring? And do I need the financial requirements? So I'm just going to show you very quickly on our website. If you have more questions about this, you can double check this. Sorry, can you all see my screen just to double check that you are seeing the website?
No, Lisa.
Okay, let me start again. Sorry, we'll stop the share. I think I made the mistake. Up. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry about this. So as I was saying, the first step before bringing a family member is to check if the person is eligible. Not everybody is eligible, unfortunately, to bring family member in Ireland. So as you can see here, there is a wide list of people who can bring family members, but unfortunately, this excludes people who have stamps 2, stamp 3, or stamp 0. So Brian will be covering the stamp 2, but this is for a student coming to Ireland. The stamp 3 holders, as I just covered, are people who are dependent on other family members. So unfortunately, they're not eligible to bring family in Ireland. And then finally, the stamp 0s, as we explained earlier, is people who have independent means. And again, they're not eligible to bring more family member in Ireland. So the question of who to bring is also difficult because it is not possible to bring anyone in Ireland. So it would be mostly for spouse and civil partners, de facto partners, children under 18, or dependent children up until the age of 23. In some instances, it's also possible to bring elderly dependent parents, and it's just very difficult to bring any other type of family members. But if you want more information about who you want to bring and how to bring them, you can double check this webpage for more information. So once you've established if you're eligible to sponsor somebody and who you want to bring, then you can check how do I actually apply for that, for this family reunification. So as I mentioned earlier, not everyone is visa required. So you need to check, first of all, is the applicant visa required or not? Are they pre-clearance required or are they non-visa required? And again, I'll refer you to a webpage for this, as we also cover this in our website. And if you want more details, because every case is very different, so it's very hard for me to cover this in one session of 20 minutes. But there is a list basically of countries where visa required, and you can check on our website for more details as per how to apply for a visa to bring a family member. And I just wanted to be very clear as well that there is not only one type of visa, there is different type of visa. So if the person that you're bringing to Ireland is visa required, you need to make sure that you're applying for the correct visa. So D visa or long stay visa is the most common for people who wants to bring family member for longer than 3 months. And while the C visa at the bottom, as you can see, is a tourist visa that is also only given for a maximum of 3 months. So it's very important when applying for a family member to come to Ireland to check the type of visa that they're applying for. If they want to come for more than 3 months, it's the D visa. If they want to come for less than 3 months, it's the tourist visa or C visa. And just to make it a bit more confusing, they also called C visa joint EEA national. And this type of visa is very specifically for family member of EU national, excluding Irish. So for example, again, if I take the French citizen who wants to bring his Pakistani spouse, for example, where his wife would have to apply for a C visa joint EEA national, which specifically is a type of visa for EU national to come to, for non-EU national family member of EU national to come to Ireland. And I hope this is clear, but this is the main 3 type of visa which are available to come to Ireland. I thought I would also give you very quickly some information about citizenship, as not everybody, again, who has stamp in Ireland are eligible for citizenship. So it's very important to know what type of stamp and for how long you need to have that type of stamp to be eligible for citizenship. So as you can see here on that PowerPoint, there is a minimum of 5 years of reckonable residency for somebody to be eligible for citizenship. What we call reckonable residence, it's for the stamp 1, stamp 3, stamp 4, and stamp 5. Unfortunately, again, stamp 0 and stamp 2 are not eligible for citizenship. And it doesn't matter how long you've had that stamp. What matters is the type of stamp. So only stamp 1, stamp 3, stamp 4, and stamp 5 may be eligible for citizenship, depending on how long they've been holding that stamp. There is an exception for people who are married to Irish citizens and for refugees in Ireland, where they only need 3 years of reckonable residency. And in any case, a family member of or spouse of Irish citizens and refugees have stamp 4, which is a reckonable residence. It's also important to note that the people who applying for citizenship need to have at least 1 year of continuous residence prior to the application. This means that they shouldn't have any gaps in their stamp before applying. And finally, it's also important to note that there is a maximum of 6 weeks per year of absence in the States. So for example, if you want to apply for citizenship, you will need to make sure that you haven't left Ireland for more than 6 weeks per year for each year prior applying. Otherwise, this may impact your citizenship application. And I would refer you to the official webpage of the Department of Justice for more information on this citizenship, and also our website if you are interested in knowing if you're eligible for citizenship. I am done with my presentation. Thanks very much for your attention. And if you have any question, please feel free to let me know.
Thanks, Lisa.
Nice.
Thanks so much. We'll take questions at the end of the session. Thank you so much for that information. We remind you that if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box to send them, and we will answer them all after our presentations. Our next speaker is Brian. He's the Senior Policy and Communication Officer at the Irish Council for International Students. He has worked and volunteered in a number of NGOs in Ireland and Argentina and has extensive experience working in advocacy and migrant rights. Brian holds several qualifications, including a master's in international development and diploma in immigration and asylum law. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Swamya. And good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to be looking at the visas in terms of the international student perspective. But before we look at what we're going to discuss today, I'd like to just give you a bit of background information about the Irish Council for International Students. So ICOS is an independent members-based organisation. Our work focuses on providing information and advice to international students, advocating on the rights of students, and promoting good policy in international education. And we also manage the Ireland Fellows Programme. In terms of our information and advice service, in 2021, we responded to 929 queries from international students, student groups, ICOS members, and other stakeholders. The majority of our queries would relate to immigration, although we do deal with a wide variety of issues. As you can see in the graph, we responded to queries with regards to COVID, English language, schools, agency closures, higher education, etc. And we, in total, we were contacted by people from 70 different nationalities. I just want to touch upon quickly our students' rights piece. So these are some of the, as you can see in the image in this slide, these are some of the issues that we would be advocating on, and there are also areas that we've focused on our policy work. So immigration reform, employment pathways, affordable student accommodation, etc. And so far this year, ICOS has advised or mediated on behalf of 20 students who had problems with their education provider. And we also assisted one person to report the property agency who they were renting their accommodation from to the Dublin City Council. And there was an issue just in terms of the health and safety of the property, and also it was a case of where there were multiple people living in, I think it was a 2-bedroom apartment, so it was a case of overcrowded accommodation. And in addition to this, we've helped 3 people to report 3 incidents of racism. In recent times, ICOS has engaged more and more in developing our policy and research. The 3 examples I have here will be probably the most predominant or prominent examples in the last 2 years. So we conducted a survey of international students in 2020 to understand the issues that international students are facing at the time of the pandemic, or the outset of the pandemic. We also collaborated in a nationwide research project called the Next Steps for Teaching and Learning, which sought to understand the lessons that could be learned from COVID-19 in terms of higher education and teaching and learning. And finally, we conducted research into the challenges that international students were facing due to COVID in 2021. So this was kind of a follow-on piece of research to the COVID-19 International Student Survey in 2020. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, we manage a scholarship program on behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs. So in my presentation today, I'll be focusing on the student visa, the 3rd level graduate scheme, and frequently asked questions with regards to the 3rd level graduate scheme. And I'll also give an overview of the 2 main work permits. So for non-EEA students, in order to study in Ireland, either on an English language course or in a higher education institute in third level, they must study in a course that's on the interim list of eligible programs. This permits or the Stamp 2 visa permits students to work up to 20 hours per week throughout the year and 40 hours per week in specific periods. Those are from Christmas, from the 15th of December until the 15th of January, and during the summer months, June, July, and August, and also September. Sorry, I'm missing September, the month of September, in my slide. But international students on a Stamp 2 visa are able to work up to 40 hours a week, 4 months of the year: June, July, August, and September. The maximum time that someone could be on a student visa is normally 7 years. In the case of PhD students, this period is up to 8 years. And I just have also included that for anyone who's studying a third level program that has an internship element to it, the internship element cannot exceed 50% of the length of the course. We'll also include the Stamp 2A, which would be probably less frequent, at least for the people who might be attending this webinar today. But just so you know, the Stamp 2A is another student visa, and it is given to people normally when they're on a semester abroad program, or in the case of the spouse of a PhD student, or someone is studying a course that's not on the ILEP, the interim list of eligible programs. So I suppose the main downside to this visa is that you cannot work. Moving on to the third level graduate scheme, third level graduate program, sorry. It used to be called the third level graduate scheme. It's now called the third level graduate program. This is a graduate visa for students who have studied in higher education in Ireland at level 8 or level 9 or 10. The name of the visa is the Stamp 1G. If you study a degree, for example, a level 8 degree, then you can avail of the visa for 12 months. If you study a master's or some other sort of postgraduate studies that's level 9 or 10, then you can avail of this visa for up to 24 months, subject to renewal after 12 months. So entitlements under the third level graduate program: you can return to education after availing of the program if you re-enter the program at a higher level. If you have not, that's if you have not already exceeded the 2-year limit on the third level graduate scheme. So you can access the graduate visa, the third level graduate scheme, on 2 occasions, but no more than this. So it can be on 2 separate occasions. So the first occasion, if you, for example, you study a level 8 degree, you complete your degree, you get a Stamp 1G for 1 year, and then you decide to return to study again at level 9 master's level. And then after you complete your studies, you can once again avail of the third level graduate program. Sorry. Another thing that is worth noting is that you must be able to, in order to avail of access to third level graduate program, you must be, it's considered as part of the 7-year limit of student permission, student studies. So you must be able to, it must be included within this 7-year limit. Entitlements under the program. So you're able to work up to 40 hours per week for up to 24 months. There's no limit on the type of work or the salary level, and you can apply for a further visa permission to remain in Ireland under an employment permit, for example. Just also highlighted here that immigration does expect people to work in their area of studies. It's not a requirement, but it is typically expected that if you studied something like business, then you'll work in your area of studies, so in a business of some sort. In order for graduates to qualify for the Stamp 1G, they must be notified in writing by the relevant Irish awarding body or institute that they have achieved the award for which they have enrolled to study. You must hold a current Stamp 2 visa, and as I mentioned just a minute ago, you must not have already exceeded the 7-year limit on student permission. In case of PhD student, that is 8 years. So once again, just to highlight that the time spent on the Stamp 1G is also considered as part of the 7-year limit or 8-year limit for student studies. And you must normally you must apply within 6 months of receiving your final results. In addition to these requirements, in order to apply for the Stamp 1G, you need statements of your final results, valid passport, your IRP card, private medical insurance, and a payment of €300. I'm now going to go through some frequently asked questions about the Stamp 1G or the third level graduate program, which ICOS often responds to in our queries that we receive from international students and others, other stakeholders. So I have not found a job in my first year of the program. Will I be able to renew my Stamp 1G? Answer to this: if you've not found work in your first year, you will need to show the immigration authorities that you have taken appropriate steps to find employment. For example, proof of having done interviews, signing up to employment agencies. FAQ2, I originally enrolled to do a master's program. However, I decided not to do a thesis. I was able to finish my studies with a diploma instead. Can I still apply for the Stamp 1G? No. In order to apply for the third level graduate program, you must have achieved the award that you enrolled to study. So this is very important. So if you enroll to do a master's, then you must complete the master's in order to be able to access the third level graduate program. So Lisa already covered this. Is it possible to bring family members over to Ireland on the Stamp 1G visa? And the answer is no. I have finished all my coursework. Can I apply for the program now? Unfortunately not. So in order to apply for the program, you must have been notified that you've achieved your awards. So you have to wait until you get your results in order to make your application. This is a frequent question that we hear in ICOS, so we receive it. But I've been working full time over the summer, and in September, can I keep working full time? And sadly, it is not possible to continue working full time after September, and all graduates must wait for their results in order to apply for the Stamp 1G. So this is the last question in the frequently asked questions on the Stamp 1G, and it is frequent. It's a question that is regularly comes up. I was unable to find work because of the pandemic. Can my Stamp 1G visa be extended? So ICOS has been informed by the immigration authorities that they will accept applications from graduates who were on the Stamp 1G and who could not find work in their area of studies. The people need to demonstrate that they were unable to find work in their area of studies because, or had limited opportunities because of the pandemic. However, there is no guarantee that if you apply for an extension of your visa and you do have evidence that you were unable to find work, there's no guarantee that your visa will be extended, because it will be at the discretion of the immigration authorities to decide if they give you an extension or not. So they say that each case will be assessed individually. These are some examples of evidence to show that you were affected by the pandemic. So if you were on the pandemic unemployment payment, if you have proof that you were working in a frontline service or in some other job that is not related to what you studied, or proof that you signed up to a recruitment agency. Those are just some examples of ways that you can prove that you weren't working at some stage of the pandemic while you were on stamp 1G, and that affected and the pandemic affected your chances of working and being able to work in an area of your studies. So now we're moving on to the final part of the presentation, where I will discuss briefly an overview of the two main employment permits. Those are the general employment permit and the critical skills permit. So the general employment permit is any job that is not, so it's all jobs are eligible except those that are listed as ineligible, which feature on the ineligible category of employment for employment permits. So any job that is not on this list is potentially eligible for to be included as a general employment permit. And then the other main employment permit is the critical skills permit, and these are jobs that are considered to be critically important to the Irish economy and which feature on the highly skilled eligible occupation list. These are some examples of ineligible jobs that would feature on the ineligible list that I just mentioned: hotel manager, hairdresser, travel agent, etc. So you would not be able to get a general work permit or a critical skills permit for any of these occupations. So if you get a general work permit, you will be issued with a stamp 1 visa, as Lisa mentioned in her presentation. This is generally issued for 2 years and then can be renewed for further 3 years. Applications can be made by the employer or the employee. And after 5 years, you can apply for long-term residency and obtain a stamp 4 visa. You may bring family members after 12 months. However, as Lisa touched upon, you would people on a general work permit or stamp 1 or spouses, dependents on an eligible or ineligible to work. Finally, all jobs are eligible unless excluded under the list of ineligible categories of employment for employment permits. And this list, similar to the critical skills list, is updated on a regular basis. These are the main requirements of a general employment permit. Applications must be qualified. Of course, that goes without saying. €27,000 is the minimum salary for graduates. You must have a job directly from an employer that is based in Ireland. Generally, applications should be made 12 weeks before the start date, the employment start date. Most employers may not have more than 50% non-EU or non-EEA staff, and a labour market needs test must be done prior to advertising the position. So basically, the position has to be advertised so that Irish people or people from the EU have an opportunity to apply for the job. Moving on to the critical skills permit. People who obtain a critical skills permit will be issued with a stamp 1 visa. This is issued for 2 years, and then following which the visa will be renewed as a stamp 4. So people on a critical skills permit can apply for long-term residency after 5 years. They are eligible for immediate family reunification, and different, or unlike the stamp 1 visa or the general work employment permit, spouses or partners can work on a stamp 1G visa. So the spouses are given a stamp 1G visa, which allows them to work, and no market needs test is required. So the job that is on offer does not need to be advertised. Requirements of the critical skills permit: applicants must be qualified. Minimum salary starts off at €30,000 for graduates. All jobs with 64,000 or above, or all jobs are eligible if their salary is a minimum of 64,000 or above. Generally, applications must be made 12 weeks before starting the employment start date, and all job offers must be for 2 years. These are just some of the main areas where high skilled applicants list or critical skills jobs are often found in the areas of health, IT, financial services, research. And you can find out more information in the link, which you can see when which you can check later on after we share our slides. And that's pretty much everything from me today. Hopefully everything that I went through with you, the student visas, the stamp 1G, the FAQs, and the work permit was clear. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them after when we finish the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. We will be circulating the presentations, as Brian mentioned, so that you will have all the information that you need. Now I again go to our last speaker for the day, Edith, who is a vibrant member of MASI, who with her 5-year-old daughter has made a notable contribution to the movement following a creative performance depicting their asylum experience at the just concluded MASI journal launch. Edith is originally from Nigeria, West Africa, and has been offered a place at the Dublin City University to study Masters in International Relations. Over to you, Edith.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Okay, apologies, please. My system is a bit funny. All right. So good morning. My name is Edith Chukwu. I give honor to God who made today possible. And I thank you, Sonia, and the entire team of NCP for having me present this on behalf of the movement of asylum seekers in Ireland. But firstly, I'd like to look at what as an asylum seeker, who an asylum seeker is. And remember, we were talking about the processes that asylum seekers have to take to settle in the country. So an asylum seeker basically is one who has left their country seeking protection in another. And then who is a refugee? A refugee is one who has a well-founded fear of persecution because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership of a particular social group. The difference basically between an asylum seeker and a refugee is that one is well-founded. The reason for seeking asylum is well-founded. And an asylum seeker is considered a potential refugee as well until proven. All right, now there are two aspects of a refugee. Could either be a program refugee or a convention refugee. A program refugee is a person who's been invited to Ireland under a government decision in response to a humanitarian request, usually from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It's been programmed already. It can be said that the country is very much aware of your situation, and the moment such a person enters the country, they're declared refugees on arrival. So while the conventional refugee is one who fulfills the requirements of the definition of a refugee under the terms of the Geneva Convention. So moving on, we'll be going now into the processes. Now, the first is the application process. Of course, at the time of entry, possibly by if you're coming in through the airport or ferry seaport, you make your declaration at that point, or you go to the IPO office, the International Protection Office, later on to make your declaration. Then this is followed by a preliminary interview where you're asked where you're from, your name, why and how you came to Ireland. At this point, it is not processed in the sense that whatever you have said would be accepted until until IPO processes your request to be sure that, all right, this one truly has basis for seeking asylum. So now at this stage, the applicant's photograph as well as fingerprints are taken and sent to Eurodac. Eurodac stands for the European Asylum Dactyloscopy Database, where it is matched with the information there. So to find out if you've sought asylum in other countries. So at this stage, it's not accepted. The International Protection Office writes to let you know. And then if accepted, the acceptance refers to your preliminary interview and your Eurodac passing the requirements, having not seen that you don't have any record anywhere. At this stage, you move to the next phase, which becomes you completing a questionnaire. A questionnaire will be given you to complete in 21 days, oftentimes 15 working days. Now, while this is going, you'll be wondering, okay, where then would it be? They have to fill in a questionnaire for 21 days. Now, the country kindly allows the applicant to remain in the country for as long as this happens. The applicant is allowed to stay in the country, have legal aid, accommodation, social welfare, healthcare, and even education for the children. The only things not allowed at this stage is for the applicants to open a business or work. However, the applicants may work after 6 months if at that time a decision is yet to be made on their application. So it's valid for 12 months and renewable afterwards. I'd like to, thanks to my artistic skills, I put this here to ensure that I don't miss this out. Now, in order to have access to medical, to healthcare, education, and all of these things, it's important for an applicant to have what's called a PPS. It's a personal public service number, which one has to apply for. And the reason I'm placing it right beside A&E and healthcare is that some persons are not aware that even if you don't have a PPSN, you can have access to healthcare. However, that wasn't my own case because I didn't know. And somehow my daughter almost died. She was ill. I didn't know I could access healthcare. And I just felt, okay, since I don't have a PPSN, the country doesn't know me. That's what PPS is like. The country knows you. The country is saying, okay, we are aware of your presence. We are aware that you are in the country. Therefore, have access to these and that. So now you are able to access healthcare. Accident and emergency can always attend to such a person, even if they don't have a PPSN at that time. As I stated here, it takes 6 to 8 weeks. Now, The fourth process is for one to get interviewed based on what they have filled in the questionnaire. At this point in time, you will be asked to give details as to why you left your country, your experiences that led to you leaving your country and seeking refuge in Ireland. It can take some time, but it is hoped that the delay won't come from the applicant. Now, getting recommendation is the next step. The IPO, after sitting on the questionnaire and then having interviewed the person, makes their recommendation. And then after that, they would either the applicant a refugee, grant the person subsidiary protection status, or permission to remain, or a refusal. And oftentimes it can be appealed. That's the procedure, not oftentimes. It can be appealed even if there is a refusal. And that appeal goes to the International Protection Appeals Tribunal. However, the IPO makes their recommendation to the MDU. We'll talk about that later. But let's talk about what subsidiary protection refers to. Subsidiary protection is a type of international protection where if one does not qualify as a refugee, the risk that such a person would suffer serious harm in their own country. While permission to remain refers to a situation whereby if the International Protection Office does not deem it fit for one to be declared a refugee, they could say, all right, you have permission to remain in the country. And this is oftentimes based on the connection to Ireland, the person's humanitarian conditions, or the person's character and conduct in the country. Refusal and appeals. In the case of a refusal, appeals can be made through the applicant's solicitor. I mentioned earlier that one of the rights allowed an applicant, even before the first decision is made on the application, is a right to legal aid. So a solicitor represents the applicant in case of a refusal to make an appeal, and this is expected to be done within the first 10 working days of receiving the refusal. So if unsuccessful, a fresh application begins, should new reasons emerge. But of course, it doesn't come without permission from ICOS. Now, the last stage is the ministerial decisions unit. While the IPO may have processed the application, they actually forward also their recommendation to the Ministry of Justice, the Department of Justice. And the unit that takes care of decisions like this is the Ministerial Decisions Unit, MDU. They put a seal on the recommendation given by IPO or not. If they find reasons to say that, oh no, we cannot give or grant refugee status to a person, they have their reservations, they are not going to accept the recommendation given by IPO. So I'll call them the seats of the decision. So now IPO, if the IPO did not recommend I get a refugee, then the MDU decides if there are other reasons for granting you leave to remain in Ireland. So now if an applicant gets whatever decision, whether to refugee status or permission to remain in the country, subsidiary protection, whatever it is, they're expected to register it with the local immigration office. I'd like to touch on the Temporary Protection Directive, please. It is an EU law that was introduced in 2001, and it was created as a special procedure to deal with a mass influx of people in need of international protection. It was triggered by the EU Commission. So these persons are granted temporary protection and get a residence permit for a duration of 1 to 3 years. They also get the same kind of things and more that potential asylum seekers or refugee, asylum seekers get. But in addition to that, they get employment. Then again, this directive allows EU countries to transfer people to other member states with the agreement of receiving country, with the agreement of the receiving country. For instance, if Ireland does not consent to this, nobody will be sent here. So, and it was adopted into the Irish law by Section 60 of the International Protection Act in 2015. It is this directive that is working for those coming in from Ukraine. Now you can find further information on this on www.ipo.gov.il and also the Irish Naturalization and Immigration Services. The email is info@ipo.gov.ie, and then you can find more information basically on these processes on citizens information, on the citizens information website. I've been asked to talk about MASI. So MASI stands for the Movement of Asylum Seekers in Ireland. It's not an NGO. It is not a political party. It's not funded. I call us a family of asylum seekers. We're a movement, as the name implies, we're just a group of people united by a common purpose. It started in 2014 when there was a need for us to seek justice, freedom, and dignity for all asylum seekers. It's from then on that the group has been in existence. There is no membership per se. I cannot say I'm a member of MASI. No, we are all part of MASI through our commitment and contribution. We don't even have, we just have one leader instead. So everybody becomes a part of this movement and we hold each other's hand, support each other wherever necessary. I'd also like to leave you with a performance that captures an asylum experience, a typical asylum experience. Though not all of it. This was performed during the journal launch of the Movement of Asylum Seekers in Ireland. Like I said, it's not an NGO or anything, but once in a while we come together to socialize as well as talk about our experiences, handle issues here and there. But most importantly, we like to hold each other's hand to ensure that nobody suffers, especially those who do not have families here in the country. So yes, we launched a journal where we put together our experiences as asylum seekers in the country. I'll leave you with this hyperlink and I hope that you enjoy what you watch. That said, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for having me, Sonia.
Thanks. Thank you, Edith. Can I request all the speakers to please come back on the screen and we can take Q&A. We have received a number of questions and we've also been trying to answer some of the questions on the Q&A itself. But now I hand it over to Laura to host the Q&A, and we'll try and take maximum questions, but we also have to be a little respectful of the time. So if we are not able to answer all the questions, we have noted down your questions and we will email you answers back if that's okay. But over to you now, Laura. Thanks.
Thank you everyone, and thanks to our panelists for a very informative session. I believe most questions have been answered, but I can see one or two that have not been answered. And if I missed anything, Soumya, please let me know. but I think most questions have been answered by yourself and Lisa. And so to the participants at the moment, feel free to drop in more questions. We have about 10 minutes to go. And someone asked about the partnership visa. I think this would be for Liza. They said they are Brazilian and they've been living with their boyfriend who is Irish since January, and they would like to know how the partnership visa works, as they have been together for 3 years and are getting engaged soon. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I suppose this lady is talking about the de facto partnership, which is a specific type of application. So the length of how long the people have been together matters, but what really matters the most is how long they've been living together and cohabiting. So even if they have been in a relationship for 3 years, it doesn't mean that this person is eligible, unfortunately, because when making an application as a de facto partners, what really matters is to provide evidence that the couple has been living together and cohabiting for a minimum of 2 years. So if they only started living together in the same house, unfortunately, they wouldn't be eligible to apply for the de facto application. They would need to wait until they have 2 years of joint or cohabitation, basically. And something else that we'd like to add is that the person applying for the de facto application is to make sure that they keep renewing their permission in the meantime, because it would make things very complicated if the person is undocumented when applying for the de facto application. So renew whatever stamp that the person has at the moment. It could be a stamp 2, and then whenever they have 2 years of cohabitation, then potentially apply for the de facto application. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And thank you, Lisa. There's another question here I don't think has been answered. Again, if I miss anything, please correct me. But the question is about a lady who, so her husband is doing a PhD in Galway, and she's wondering if she could accompany him and have a work permit. So I assume this lady is still in her respective country. She says she is a civil engineer, which in brackets would grant her critical skills. And she's from Argentina and he's from Brazil. So I guess she's not in Ireland and her husband is in Ireland and she wants to accompany him and she's wondering if she'd have a work permit. I believe she would. So she would be a spouse and he has a PhD. But Lisa, I'll let you, Lisa or Brian can answer this because this person is currently doing their PhD and they have a spouse. Yes. Is that clear or do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, that's clear. Yeah, I can answer that, or clear enough at least. If the husband or the partner is doing a PhD in Galway, that's fine. They'd have a stamp 2 visa, and potentially the partner would be able to join them, but they would need to be able to show that they have sufficient resources to be able to cover both the living expenses of the PhD student and their partner. Partner would only get a stamp 2A visa, so they wouldn't be able to, they'd be able to join the PhD student partner in Galway, but they wouldn't be able to work. If the person has is professional in an area that's on the critical skills list, I mean, they can apply for jobs and try and get a critical skills visa themselves. But that would be the only way that they would be able to get a work permit. They'd have to apply in their own right.
Okay, so they can come on a stamp 2, is it A? Stamp 2 what?
A stamp 2. So if they were going to join their partner in Galway, the person who's studying a PhD, then they would need to apply for a visa to join the partner, and they would, if they were successful, they would get a stamp 2A visa.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I've covered all the points there. So Lisa, please feel free to jump in there.
Okay.
No, I think he covered it.
Yeah,
I
most
agree.
of it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she would have to come on a stamp 2A and then once here apply for jobs in her own capacity. And as an engineer, chances are that she would be able to get a job and be able to switch visas. So if you're listening, that would be the best way to go about it. It might be a bit tedious, but it is possible. Okay, thank you both. I'm going to this next question. So this lady has two questions. What does an employer have to comply with in the labor market needs test? Does it suffice to advertise on the DSP jobs website? That's the first question. Number two, can a recognized refugee with a valid passport from their country of origin travel internationally on this passport? Or does it depend on the immigration requirements of the country she wants to travel to? I think the first question can go to Lisa, and then the second question maybe to Edith. I'll repeat the questions if you need me to. Should I repeat it, Lisa?
I'm reading it here. So the labor market needs test. I don't know it by heart. I would refer the lady straight to the web page. But my understanding is that so that's for general work employment permits. This needs to be advertised, I think, 12 weeks prior applying for the work permit. This is one of the requirements for general work employment permit, for the job to be advertised 12 weeks prior the person actually applies for the work, and we need to provide evidence that this has been done. And that's top of my head, but I would refer Greta to the Department of Enterprise and Innovation website, because they have a specific page on labor market need test, and I can maybe just answer the message and put the web page there for her if needed.
I can add to that answer if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So for the employer to comply to the labor market needs test, as Lisa mentioned, that you have to advertise it in online for a month, and also you have to put advertisement in a newspaper for 3 days. And those are two things that you have to do in the labor market assessment test. And then you have to provide that. So that is basically the evidence that you have advertised, and there isn't a lot of people applying or things like that. So that is the answer to the labor market needs test. It is also, like as Lisa said, there's a specific, like in that specific link that we'll share right now, you'll have all the answers and step by step of how the labor market assessment test is done and what are the requirements of it. So yeah, but yeah, it's two ways. It's both online and 3 days in the newspaper. Yeah. The second part of the question, I'm not too sure. Lisa, do you know the second part of the question?
Recognized refugee valid passport. So the issue that I have with that question is that refugees are not supposed to have passports, because Edith, you will back me up on that. But people who are granted refugee status in Ireland, their passport is taken when they arrive in Ireland, when they make the application for asylum. So somebody who is staying as a refugee in Ireland either have no ID or an Irish travel document. And that allows to travel within the EU, but again, it would need to be checked first with the embassy of the country. So for example, if the person is from, let's say, Bolivia, they got granted refugee status and they have an Irish travel documents, they want to go to Spain, they need to check with the Irish embassy in Spain or the Spanish embassy in Ireland if they're allowed to go to that country without applying for a visa. That is specific for everybody, so depends on the type of travel document that they obtained, but they would certainly not have a passport if they're refugees in Ireland.
Can I just also add, just on Lisa's point there, the immigration authorities, Immigration Service Delivery announced in July that there's a temporary suspension on people who have been granted some sort of refugee or asylum status within the EU and have a travel document from traveling to Ireland.
Yes, I think you're right. I just I'm not sure of that. The condition that would be my colleagues in the refugee service, and I cover the migrant project. So I think you're correct, but I'm not entirely sure of the condition for this.
I think it also varies a lot from different case to case, to be very honest. So what you can do is you can actually leave this with us. I will actually try and find the answer and email it back because we do not want to say something that is not absolutely correct. But a lot of these cases are very case to case basis.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you both. Edith, do you have any insight on that, or should we just go with that? If you have anything to add to that, please do.
Oh, no, I don't. To be on the safe side. I know a refugee is a refugee. Just like you said, the passport is taken and the person is considered a part of Ireland if the person has been declared a refugee, and you're not even allowed to travel to your own country. So it would then depend, just like Lisa said, on the requirements expected of you from the other country.
Great. Edith, thank you. I believe all questions have been answered, but please let me know. I'm almost 100%.
I may want to answer one more, if you don't mind. There is somebody who is asking, in order to obtain a new passport, I had to travel for 1 day before presenting my citizenship application. This could interrupt my 365 days consecutive living in Ireland prior to presenting my application. So I just want to clarify on that. When applying for citizenship, there is a continuous 1 year prior application, but that does not this doesn't concern people who are traveling outside. So as I mentioned in my presentation, there's a right to go outside of Ireland for a maximum of 6 weeks per year, including the year prior the application. Because they tried to change that back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, but this has been overruled by the court. So it is possible to travel outside of Ireland prior the year for applying for citizenship. But what I was saying in my presentation is the gap between the stamps that shouldn't be there. So if there is, for example, 10 days of gaps between the stamps within the year prior the application, that could be problematic. But if this person has a full year of residence permission in Ireland prior to the application and they go on holidays for 2 weeks, or they go to renew their passport in their home country, that's absolutely fine. This is not counted as an interruption. This is not a gap in the stamps. This is just availing traveling to renew a passport. So that's totally fine. This person can apply for citizenship. Yeah.
I actually just found another question, but thank you, Lisa, for expanding on that and for explaining further. There's one question that I just saw, and it says, does any of the speakers have any experience with people who have come to Ireland under the Irish Humanitarian Assistance Program? And these people, and if they can apply for family reunification. So the case is 3 people who have recently arrived in Mayo under this program, and they are waiting for their refugee certificates. However, each of these people have gotten married in the last 3 years, and since this Irish Humanitarian Assistance Program has been submitted, and they wish to bring their spouses. And so the question is, are they eligible to bring a spouse under the IHAP?
Do you want me to answer, or at least do you want to take this one on? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, that would be a question for my colleagues in the refugee service. So feel free to contact us in the migrant project, and we can refer your question to our colleagues. But my understanding is, if this person has availed from the Irish Humanitarian Assistance Program, then it means that their family members cannot avail of that program. So if this person wants to bring a family member, they will need to apply for a visa, potentially if it's from a visa required country, and they will need to make sure that they meet the requirements. So no, my answer would be no, this person cannot apply for family reunification under the IHAP because they avail themselves of that program.
Great. Well,
Nice.
thank you. And thank you, everybody. We have concluded the session. Most questions have been answered, and the questions that have not been answered here will be taken via email and expect answers. And thank you all for the speakers. I'll let Sonia conclude the session.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, everyone. As Laura mentioned, that I have noted down the questions, and if your questions have gone unanswered, we will get back to you on the email, and all these presentations will be circulated to you as well. So if you have any further query or need or support, please get in touch with us. I've left links of all the organizations and all the relevant contact details also that I will be passing on shortly. I want to thank once again everyone who was able to join us today, especially thanks to Lisa, Brian, and Edith for sharing their valuable time and knowledge with us, the ISL interpreters, Ali and Pauline, for their hard work, my MyVow colleague Laura, who has been a huge reason for the well-organized session, and all our partners and service providers who are striving every day for a fair and equal treatment and social justice for migrant people in Ireland. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a very good day and stay safe. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Sonia.